What is the worst thing that you've seen a coworker do and still avoid being fired? Had a boss storing pictures of himself in only his wide open bathrobe on company servers. It was reported to HR but wasn't fired for it. Later he was arrested as part of an undercover sting where he thought he was meeting a 15-year-old girl about 500 miles away. Way too many questions comments to reply to all of them. More details. The images were stored in a shared folder used by a few employees. The guy was our IT manager, so he should have known better than storing them there. Assuming the pictures were taken using a work camera because digital cameras were very expensive at that time and the company had a few. Before he left for the weekend to meet the girl, he had asked to use the digital camcorder I had for work. He told me he needed it to make a video of his home possessions for insurance purposes, but I was suspicious of that, so I told him I needed it for work. We found out he was arrested when he called the computer room collect from jail. This was later in the evening when he no-showed for work that day. He didn't accept the charges but called back later to see what he was charged with. At that time we were told solicitation of a minor, but the whole details came out later when he was on the local news station. For the ones that doubt the story. Worst coworker ever was the credit mooch. He would constantly horn in on other people's projects, getting his name added to them to make it look like he was doing it when he actually not. If people tried to assign him any work on said project, he would have a personal emergency or a virus would make him lose all his work, or his schedule is booked with other project, or the worst, he would pull some sucker in to help him with it, and said sucker would end up doing it all in utter frustration. Because he was so good at stealing credit, he managed to get top marks on his reviews despite doing absolutely zero actual work for the company. I know at least 4 people quit due to this guy getting better raises than they did. Far as I know, they never actually got rid of him. Worked with a guy who punctured the main gas line to our shop 3 separate times. It was a construction company and he somehow was still my superintendent, although he could have blown up the shop. Accidentally send the last 3 years of account details back statements from one company to their direct competitor. Drill a hole clean through a condensate line and have the ceiling of the 3-car garage collapse when the drywall gave. Me, I am that guy. AMA. I know someone who managed to close an entire supermarket early for the first time in its history, costing the company several thousands of pounds. Because they tried to set a clock on a computer back an hour to avoid missing some deadline for a daily routine. He said it seemed such a good idea at the time. HR found out about a person's elective surgery and made fun of her with a former employee. Let me recap. This person knew about an employee's private medical information because she worked with our healthcare plan in her role as HR, and shared that private information with another person for the sole purpose of mocking the employee. She was not fired. Had a coworker as a standard business practice falsely condemn furnaces in winter to pressure homeowners into buying new systems and pad his commission check. I couldn't do anything as I had no direct proof, but he would joke about it all the time. It did finally catch up with him when one customer smelled BS and called other companies with advanced testing machines. Took those results and sued the poop out of him. I ended up working for that second company and haven't looked back. As an assistant manager at a Valvoline instant oil change, I was dealing with an unreasonable customer that had just spit at a female employee that he didn't want working on his car. He didn't know that the guy under his car was her boyfriend. The guy comes up the steps, grabs an oil gun, and starts pumping 10W30 oil climate into the guy's window as he's frantically trying to start the car and roll up the window. The employee was reprimanded pretty hard, but it was understood why he did it. No charges were filed. The franchise owner paid a lot of money to have the guy's car cleaned. Obviously, I never saw him again. Edit. I never saw the customer again. If I remember correctly, the employee was suspended for a week. Edit number 2. I'm very sorry that I misspoke. I was an assistant to the manager. Guy at my wife's old job was brought in because he was really good at selling the services they provided. Proceeded to send D-pics to the women at work and solicit nudes from them. Women said to stop or they'd take it up with management, and it subsided some. Solicited nudes from a new chick who asked my wife about it, and my wife went to management with everything and said this guy's out or I'm quitting. Well, she quit. Guy's still there, but most the original female staff has quit. Stole a bunch of Mark tools. They were painted white. Showed everyone in the shop pictures of his deer with said tools in the background. Gets reported. Boss calls him on it. He said, "You got me. I stole a gallon of white paint." Never heard the boss laughing so hard. Year later or so he gets promoted, lol. Obligatory, not me but my wife. She had a coworker that literally punched a customer. Wasn't fired. He later got into a physical altercation with another coworker. Wasn't fired. Then he wrapped my wife's hair around her throat and play choked her. Still was not fired. Finally, he got into yet another altercation with a coworker and pulled a gun on him. All while on the clock. Then he was fired. A guy at the plant I work at scrapped $360,000 in airplane parts because he didn't even bother to look at the work instructions. He just drives a forklift now. Telemarketing coworker was very obviously a psycho or sociopath. Showed up late every shift by definition. Had quite a temper with authority, but would often just cause trouble out of boredom. By his own admission, the most controversial thing he did one particular day was address every client he spoke to by the N-word. Once the manager heard him, he yelled at him outside for 20 minutes and that was the end of it. A week later, this coworker denied it had ever happened before, going on a tangent about how he liked to start arguments with his girlfriend just to see her cry. Ducking sociopath. Edit. Gonna tack on a reply I posted here because it seems to have gotten buried. He pronounced it with an "r" harder than a priest in a room full of altar boys every time. Hey Enr, we're generic window and door company. Buy from us. I've studied psychology and the current opinion seems to be that psychopaths are born with the lack of empathy. Sociopaths learn to lose their empathy because of their life situation. TBH, I'm not sure why he wasn't fired. And if I had been manager at the time, I certainly would have fired him on the spot. It was a super lax job though. One of the best typical first job environments you could ask for. Think workaholics with a much smaller office. But the manager liked to pal around with us, too. We all used silly names and tried to goof around in harmless Super Troopers fashion. But this one guy just didn't care where the line was and took everything too far. This dude walks a server out of the server room every 6 months or so to sell on eBay. We have literally no security except the front door. But the owner is so ancient and out of touch I doubt she even remembers things are being stolen. Got caught with CP on his work computer. Had access to the OSINT taken away but wasn't fired as a sign it's possible he didn't know it was real CP. Edit. Just to clarify a few things. 1. This was about 15 years ago at a public institution in Canada. 2. CP is child PRN. 3. Upper management was terrible in so many ways. 4. I talked to a friend who was in the RCMP. She said to me reporting him would lead to the institution lawyering up and an internal investigation would happen. That's all because likely upper management erased the HD and left no paper trail. See number 3. 5. He used Kazaa, an ancient P2P. I work in a medical marijuana state. One guy neglected to check a dry room for a few days assuming all was well. All was not well. At all. The dehumidifier crapped out while the plants were being hung to dry and sat in a warm, dark room for 3 days before it was someone else's responsibility to check it. By that point every single plant was coated in mold and we had to throw out a little over $1 million worth of product. Side note, I had never done the math to see what he cost us until now and am mad all over again. His only punishment was to be denied moving to day shift, but other than that it was forgotten about. Nothing. Documenting work as completed when no actual work had been done. Management knew or was suspicious of it, but not so much as a write-up or reprimand. Eventually, management changed, figured out no work was being done, called it fraud, and canned them. The job was easy too, and good money. I don't get why they didn't just do the work. A coworker jumped out from behind a door at my husband, who is a disabled combat veteran with PTSD, dressed as if he was from the Middle East. He was literally trying to trigger a flashback. No repercussions, as he was the boss friend. 2 weeks later, he fell down some icy steps and broke both legs. Karma took care of that one. Full-on sexual harassment. Little backstory. I work in a private country club style dining banquet event space. A drunk on the job manager pinned an hourly server against the wall during a nighttime wedding reception. She punched him in the ribs and tried pushing him off of her. We all saw it. We all reported to HR. Another manager physically removed him off of her. This was about 4 months ago and he's still in his position. She quit due to him telling everyone she'd lied about the entire situation. Eat weed. Urinate outdoors on garbage cans in public. Masturbate and drink on the job. He tried to run over a security officer with his car when the security officer told him he couldn't park where he wanted to park. Almost succeeded. 2. Oh man. It was winter time and she was helping a customer by carrying something they had purchased out for them. Once outside, but still on the store property, she slipped and sustained an injury. Was threatening to sue the business and was also trying to claim workers' compensation. Came into work every day with a sling on her arm and constantly wincing and being in pain. Anyway, HR and the store manager call her into a meeting. Sit her down and show her the video surveillance from outside, which she obviously didn't know was there, showing her faking her fall. I don't know everything, but she got called out hard and she broke down and admitted everything. For some reason they kept her on. She then tried it again like 6 months later, this time claiming that a customer had something from their cart hit her or fall on her or something. Again. Tried to claim workers' comp and had this whole show of being injured. They pull up security footage again and disprove her injury claims. She still wasn't fired. Blew my mind lol. Not giving patients their medication at the right time and generally not giving a duck about them. I have a coworker that has terrible work ethic. He doesn't know how to separate his personal life from his work life, so if he's in a bad mood, which happens often, everyone will know including customers. He's had at least 3 disciplinary meetings. Once he was caught just ducking around for an hour. Not exactly sure what happened, but our boss wasn't happy. Another time he just didn't show up to work without calling in. And it was a day that everyone knew would be busy. I don't know why he hasn't been fired yet. Everywhere else I've worked he would have been gone by now. One of my former co-workers, she's since been fired for stealing customers' lottery winnings, told an elderly woman that she was stupid for not knowing how to pump gas. This woman's husband had recently passed and he had always pumped the gas for her, so she never learned. I had horrible second-hand embarrassment when the woman came in and told us. We relayed it to the manager. I work at a psychiatric hospital and we had a patient who was blind and who was admitted for drug-induced psychosis along with visual and auditory hallucinations. At my hospital we only accept the people who are an immediate danger to themselves or others. When a patient first comes to us they are put on a check sheet, meaning every 10 minutes a staff member needs to see that the patient is breathing and safe. But sometimes we need to do a one-to-one. Meaning a staff member needs to be with this person at all times, either for their safety or the safety of other patients. We also have little body alarms and floor alarms for patients, mostly geriatrics, who are unsteady while walking and need assistance. These devices let us know when they get up so we can assist them. So anyway, the blind patient was on a 1-1 and was taking a nap in their room. The staff had a laptop to do some charting while sitting on the 1-1. While this staff member put the laptop on the floor, left the room all while neglecting to hook up any of the body or floor alarms. While the staff member was out of the room, our patient got up from their bed and tripped over the laptop and face planted. Another staff noticed and we ran down to take vitals and make sure the patient was okay. Thank goodness the patient wasn't injured, but we were furious with our co-worker for leaving. Their excuse was they needed to get some paperwork they had been putting off. All in all, this person didn't get fired. Lord doesn't even know why, but did get a slap on the wrist. My co-workers and I were pissed. You do not leave a patient while on 1-1, even if they are asleep. I worked for an organization that had a small maintenance department. It only consisted of 2 guys. They both hated their jobs and felt underpaid, and were applying to other jobs. They both left work without telling anyone they were leaving to go to the same job interview. On the clock. The job interview also happened to be for a job at a sister location for our office, and they both used our manager as a reference. She got a phone call within minutes of their interviews, and collected their unstamped time cards before they even got back to the office. She had them dead to rights for wage theft. but it also took 2 months to fill any position at our organization because of crushing bureaucracy for job postings, and the lawn needed to be mowed before the weekend. They both got to keep their jobs. They were still working there 6 months later when I left. Drive around the yard on a forklift. No hands on the steering wheel. Firing a nail gun at people and objects around the yard. Ranting about how mental illness is not real and that autism was fake. This was said after I told the coworker I was autistic. There are gonna be some savage responses out there, but I work in a pretty professional environment, so the worst thing I've ever seen was my coworker falling asleep as the head of our department starting announcing layoffs. She was not one of the people who were fired that day and still falls asleep in meetings. I don't work there anymore and I still get updates about where she last passed out and those people that tell me work with her but are not her co-workers. He was caught selling sugar on work premises. Everyone was talking about how he's going to get fired. For a week. Then everybody seemed to have forgotten. Helps if the owner is your kid's godmother. I work in a garden center. This just happened today. Buddy has worked today of his scheduled shifts in the past 2 weeks. He calls in all the time, leaves a message with the cashiers, and hangs up before a manager can talk to him. On the off chance he does show up, he doesn't do anything besides move some plants around. Hell, my mom was walking through the garden center today and saw him squatted behind a stack of plants playing on his phone. Further, the guy takes multiple unauthorized breaks a day and sits in his car for at least an hour because his back hurts. He has had 2 write-ups for missing work and somehow this lazyite is still on payroll. He's an asshole towards both co-workers and customers alike. Nothing he's done is as preposterous as some of the stories I'm sure are on this thread, but the sheer consistency of his laziness is baffling to me. I had a knife pulled on me in the workplace in addition to multiple threats uttered against me, all for being honest and competent. All those people still work there. Carpentry Department, North Vancouver School District. HR dragged them all in after I resigned and laid down the law. But all those psychopaths still work there around children. I have documentation to prove this. They offered me my job back. I said, hell no. Had a coworker pull a knife and threaten to cut me. He did not get fired. I worked for the FAA. I worked in a cereal company. Saw 2 guys, half brothers, get into a fight in the tempering room. One puts a screwdriver through the other's forearm. Both were working the next day and nothing was ever said. At the same plant, a woman set up a guy on a sexual harassment charge, got found out, and still kept her job. She worked in Rand. He worked in the bag room where the bulk totes of grains were dumped into the hopper system to be pneumatically conveyed to the cookers. He was bending over one of the hoppers trying to dislodge a clog when she comes walking over. Hey, MR. Capital X. Nice ass. Double quote. He looks a bit flustered and responds, thanks. You too. All 3 of us go about our business and, as far as I know, think nothing of it. She went straight to HR and filed a complaint against him. I was the witness. That stupid it listed me as the witness. It was very quickly found out to be bullet and they did not fire her. Edit. My apologies. This wasn't meant to undercut how viable Me Too claims are. It was a itty thing I saw and got drawn into. Yes, she had a long history of weird it, especially as we got closer to her leaving the company. I do believe she was an anomaly who was trying to distract from or provide excuses for a waning performance and odd behaviors. I was accounting staff. Had someone brought in to do data entry. His sole job was to take paperwork and enter the relevant details into the accounting software. I went on maternity leave, returned from maternity leave about 12 weeks later and started getting loads of phone calls and emails from vendors asking why they hadn't been paid. Looked at the panel. Was like, why the duck didn't anyone else notice expenses were way down? And why aren't we paying anyone? Turns out data entry guy was entering a couple bills per day, then chucking the rest into some random file drawer. I had to clean up all his bullet, then got reamed by the CFO about having too much expense in the one-time period. Nothing happened to him. He ended up leaving on his own. When his next job didn't work out, they wanted to bring him back. It was a smallish company, and if you were the right religion you were untouchable. throw a large container of water out of a work vehicle and hit a motorcyclist. Knocked over a shelf with over $100k worth of very expensive equipment on it. A bird had flown into the room from a large opened window, and in the attempt to corral the bird he knocked over the shelf. He just said the bird did it. No repercussions. I work at an agency that coordinates services for individuals with disabilities. We have one worker has about 12 people on her case that gets all of her attention and about 20 who are basically ignored. It's clear she isn't trying. One of the people on her caseload was my former client. I told her the correct contact info. The stuff in the online system was wrong. If she checked the yearly plan or looked in the physical file she could get it. The next evaluation 3 months later she said she had called the number in the online system and nobody answered. I asked about the other ways of contact and she said she wasn't going to check any of the other places. I sent her the info and she got in contact the next day. She constantly says we shups drop people from services because they can't be contacted, and then when somebody else tries they get somebody the first time. Removing somebody from services and getting them back in can be a multi-month process, and if they were getting services they would lose them and maybe not be able to get them back. During evaluation she screams pretty non-stop when anything bad is pointed out. I worked in a college dining hall, and towards the end of one of the meals once I saw a coworker take an entire pizza, fold it in half and saran wrap it and stick it in her shirt. Then take an entire apple pie, saran wrap that as well and stick it in the back of her shirt, and proceeded to walk by the manager on the way out the door with grease and crumbs dripping the whole time. He didn't question it though. I'm the coworker in this scenario. I dropped an antenna, causing about 15k in damage and labor costs to repair it. Complete negligence on my part, and it could have been 100% avoided. My co-worker could have been killed if he had been under it too. Only thing that saved me was that the government reps weren't on location, so they actually took the brunt of the blame. Didn't get fired, suspended, nothing. Got a solid ass chewing from the head honcho, but went back to work like normal the next day on the same project. Definitely cashed in all of my attaboys on that one. My current boss was the top salesman at the company. He was doing side deals and stealing from the company. The owner called him in to talk about it and somehow he walked out the new manager. I am a lead supervisor with no firing power of any sorts. I trained most of my baristas so they come to me with any issues. I had one supervisor that no one likes. She jokingly punched one of my baristas. And my barista is a stocky dude. So she used enough force to sway him a little bit. You can bet I was pissed to hell and back when HR let her keep her job. Edit. To make things easier to follow along. Apologies for not clarifying. Had a coworker that got caught saving customers' private photos to his personal SD card when they brought their cell phones in for service. He just got lectured that it was inappropriate. One of the guys who trained me at my current job straight up totaled a company car because either he wasn't paying attention or fell asleep while driving. He's a corrections officer now. Absolutely nothing. I have folks that I send emails to with no answer. I reply weekly, sometimes 7-10 weeks at a time, and they just ignore me. Occasionally I'll walk into their office to ask about them, and they're quite obviously playing video games on their phone or watching YouTube videos on their computer. Yet I'm still held to the metrics that I can't reach because they won't do their part. My friend is an assistant manager at a Home Depot. He's told me about the constant shoplifters, and like most places, he's not allowed to stop them for liability issues. One time he just wasn't having it when a guy tried to run out with a backpack full of tools and supplies. My friend just chases him out and grabs the backpack in the guy's hand. Must have been a combination of him not expecting to be chased and because it was pouring rain. But the guy held onto the bag and slipped onto his back. Then he just ran away. Management there is pretty chill, so after telling them about it, nothing really happened to my friend. Was more of a don't ever do that again. But also, nice job. Teaching English overseas. One of my coworkers was found dead drunk and stumbling around talking nonsense. This was at 7:30 am in his classroom. Before school was open. His co-teacher stumbled on him passed out in the kiddie coat closet. He must have gotten in at night sometime. When they woke him, He went into rambling speech about how he had to get to the local mall and get his shopping done. Then he walked out of the school and rode off on his scooter. Didn't teach that day. Did not get let go.